Hello and welcome to the 5-Minute Message with me, Reverend Steve Chriscole. Today's message is called God Will Deliver Us. So let me read you a verse from the book of Daniel, which shows that Daniel, was blessed with God's protection when he was surrounded by evil. So let's have a read. Daniel 6 verse 23 reads as follows. Then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no matter of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Now, in case you don't know the reason why Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, which is what it was, just let me give you a quick synopsis. Daniel, who was an Israelite and captive in Babylon from Judea after it was conquered. Now, he was highly regarded by King Darius, king of the Persians, so much so that he wanted to put him in charge of his whole kingdom. Well, this meant that, he was over all the presidents and all the princes of Persia, and they were not happy about this at all. So they plotted together to have Daniel killed. Well, they couldn't do it directly, obviously, because that would bring the wrath of the king. So what they did was they petitioned the king to sign a new law which forbade anyone from praying to God except for him for 30 days. And if they did, they would be thrown into the lion's den. But of course, Daniel prayed 3 times a day, and that's what he did every day. So he was a faithful servant of God. He prayed, and despite the royal decree, he carried on praying 3 times a day. But of course, he was caught by the officials while he was praying, and despite the king liking Daniel very much, he had no choice but to follow through on the law that he had signed. So Daniel was cast into the lion's den, and the entrance of which was sealed with a large stone, and he was left overnight in that place. Now the next day, King Darius rushed to the den and called to Daniel, fully expecting him to be dead, of course. Now, we'll return to that later, but you can see, can't you, how the evil that was the conspiracy, there was an evil conspiracy to murder Daniel. So when we look at our world today, many such devious and evil plots are there to cause destruction and death. But, for us to feel all is lost, that there's no way out, it doesn't have to be somebody plotting murder. I mean, it could just as easily be something like homelessness or poverty. I mean, maybe you feel the utter sort of despair at the loss of a loved one, perhaps. Maybe the stress of life has become unbearable, and maybe you're considering suicide to make it stop. Well, when all seems hopeless, what do? Where do we turn for help? I mean, very often it seems that there is no one or nowhere that we can turn to help. So you might feel alone. You're surrounded by the hopelessness of the situation. Things look really bleak. Now, this was the situation that Daniel found himself in. I mean, these men had plotted his death, trapped him so that he would be executed in the lion's den. So, do you think Daniel felt hopeless? I mean, sure, yeah, he probably was a bit scared, and who wouldn't be when you're confronted by a hungry lion? But there's something we know about Daniel that tells us that there was hope for him. His faith in God was total. I mean, he had seen how God had protected him in the past, and his friends as well. And, the reason he was in this predicament was because no matter what, even the threat of execution wasn't going to stop him from praying and worshipping God. So it's in times like these, when we stand alone, that we need to turn to God. I mean, yes, you'll hear of atheists, yes, who start praying when faced with certain death. But for them, their fate is sealed. They had no faith in God, and finally, in their last moments, decide to turn to God out of sheer desperation, just in case there is a God, But the difference with Daniel is that he already knew God. He worshipped him and prayed to him every day. He had experienced God in his life, and he knew that God was with him. So yes, when the stone was closed behind him, he stood alone. Just him, his faith in God, and the lions. But what did he find there? He found that he was actually not alone at all. because an angel of God appeared there and shut the mouths of the lions. Well, Daniel was saved, and the next morning, when he was called by the king, he walked out of, they rolled the stone away, and he walked out, and obviously the king was very happy about that. So, look, if we look at this story, we can actually see how Daniel was in fact treated in much the same way as Jesus. If you remember, with Jesus, the Jewish leaders, they plotted to kill him. They trapped him and sent him off to the Romans to be crucified. They, fully expecting that Jesus was finally dealt with. They were satisfied that they put an end to his so-called blasphemy. But much like Daniel, they didn't understand that God was with Jesus. In fact, Jesus was God incarnate. So for Jesus, his tombstone was rolled away, but he wasn't there. See, Daniel, if we go back to Daniel, survived thanks to the intervention of an angel of God. Jesus survived because he is God, the Son of God. But there is a clear parallel. It's almost like Daniel foreshadows. It's a foreshadow story of Jesus. But there is a common factor, and it is this. It's live a godly life in service to God. That's what Daniel did. And of course, that's what Jesus did. They didn't find any fault in anything that Daniel did. And also, Jesus lived a sinless life. So there is a similarity there, isn't there? And when surrounded by evil and all seems lost, well, turn to God in your time of great need. He's a faithful God. He's promised to protect his children. So be sure to get to know God starting today. Change your life and be another Daniel who was faithful and true, worshipping him and praying daily. And if and when, and it will come round, the evil, when it comes around, there's one person you can turn to, and that's Jesus. Pray to the Father through Jesus, who is our intercessor, and the Lord will hear you. Then we have to leave the issue with God, and if it be his will, then all will be well. But, we must have both faith and hope. What about our atheist friend, our hypothetical atheist friend? Well, he has no faith, he has no hope, and he has no chance. Okay, that's the end of today's message. I hope that's been useful, and may the Lord bless you and keep you until we meet again. Take good care until then. Bye-bye.